The candles were going to kill her. Not literally, not yet, but the heat of 1,000 flames pressed against Helena Wrighton's skin like a warning. She had lit half of them herself that morning, climbing the iron ladders before dawn with shaking hands, feeding wax and wick into the mouths of every candelabra in the great hall of Valdres. She had swept the rose petals across the stone floor. She had polished the silver chalice that now sat on the ceremonial dais, waiting to be raised. She had made this ceremony beautiful, and now she was hiding from it behind a pillar of cold granite with a wolf pup pressed to her chest, watching the man she loved prepare to give himself to someone else. She told herself this was the last time. She had told herself that before. 3 years of watching him from doorways and corridors, from behind serving carts and stone pillars, from the edges of rooms she was supposed to be invisible in, had filled her with a catalog of moments she had no right to keep. The way he pressed 2 fingers to his temple when reading dispatches he didn't like. The sound of his voice in the council chamber, low and unhurried. The morning she had been scrubbing the east corridor when he came through unexpectedly and said good morning to her. Just her. As though she were a person and not a piece of furniture. She had not slept properly for a week after that. But this was going to end it. She was going to watch him choose someone else, and she was going to let the image burn so deeply into her that her foolish, survival-threatening heart would finally understand. He was not for her. He could never be for her. She was Helena Wrighton, servant, ghost, nobody. And she was Valorn, the last of a bloodline this kingdom had spent decades trying to erase. 2 reasons to disappear. 2 reasons to stop wanting things that would get her killed. On the dais, Alpha King Aaron Hoydle stood like he had been carved from the dark itself. Black tunic, black bracers, the silver chain medallion at his chest catching the candlelight like a caught star. His hair fell loose across his forehead, always slightly too long, always slightly careless, as though the most powerful man in Valdres simply had no time for formality. His jaw was set. His silver storm eyes were fixed on the woman standing across from him in white and gold, Lady Sinjero, radiant and victorious and already wearing the expression of a queen. The high priest raised his hands. His voice rolled through the vaulted space like a bell. We gather at the sacred hour to witness the binding of our Alpha King. Helena pressed her face against the wolf pup's warm fur and closed her eyes. This was goodbye, and to witness the words stopped. Not in the natural way of a pause. A complete, impossible stillness fell over the great hall of Valdres, the kind of silence that does not occur in rooms full of hundreds of people. The kind that only comes when something has gone catastrophically wrong. Helena's eyes opened. Aaron Hoydle had turned his head. She could see it from across the hall, through the crowd and the candlelight and the veil of shadows she had pressed herself into so carefully. His nostrils flared. The muscles of his jaw tightened. His silver storm eyes cut through 30 feet of crowd and candlelight and shadow with predatory, impossible precision. They found her. She was hidden. She was in shadow. She was invisible. She had spent 3 years perfecting invisible. Aaron Hoydle looked directly at her. A single word fell from his lips, measured and absolute and final as the tolling of a funeral bell. Stop. Quick pause, comment where you're watching from, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. I've got a lot more coming. Chapter 1. The hall erupted. Not all at once, the sound came in waves, a stone dropped into still water. First the ripple nearest the dais, a gasp from Lady Sin, a sharp intake from the high priest, a low shocked murmur from the assembled nobles close enough to see the Alpha King's expression. Then the wave reached the middle rows, whispers, craning necks, the rustle of silk and velvet as hundreds of people turned to follow the line of Aaron Hoydle's gaze toward the back of the hall, toward the shadows, toward nothing they could yet see. Helena could not move. Her feet had become part of the stone floor. The wolf pup whimpered softly in her arms, its small body rigid, sensing the shift in the room's energy the way only animals could, that primitive, ancient recognition that the apex predator in the space had turned its attention somewhere new, and everything else had just become secondary. She should run. Every instinct she had built and sharpened over 15 years of survival was screaming at her to run. But her legs were stone and her lungs were empty, and the Alpha King of Valdris was still looking at her, only at her, with an expression she could not name because she had never had a reason to learn what a man's face looked like when he found exactly what he had been searching for. She had never been found. Guards. His voice carried without effort. Not loud, never loud. That was the terrifying thing about Aaron Hoydle, that he never needed to be loud. Bring her to me. Helena ran. She made it approximately 6 steps. The first guard caught her arm before she reached the servants' corridor. The second materialized from her left, and the wolf pup let out a startled yip as her grip loosened and strong hands turned her bodily and propelled her back toward the center of the hall. The crowd parted. Helena's slippered feet stumbled on the rose petals she had scattered herself that morning, this morning, a lifetime ago, when she had been a ghost in this castle and not whatever she was becoming right now. The dais rose before her. The assembled court of Valdris stared down. Silk and jewels and the carefully arranged expressions of people who did not yet know what was happening but understood it was significant. Lady Sinhero stood at the altar's edge, utterly motionless, her gold-threaded gown catching every candle in the room. Her face had gone very still in the specific way of beautiful women who have just realized something is wrong but have not yet permitted themselves to believe it. And Aaron had descended from the dais. He was 3 feet in front of her. Right there, standing on the main floor of the hall with no dais between them, no ceremony, just him in all his dark and terrible nearness, and he was looking at her the way she had spent 3 years trying not to think about. The guards released her arms. Her knees buckled. She did not mean for it to happen. 3 years of surviving had conditioned her body to understand when it was in the presence of someone who could destroy her, and the instinct dragged her down before her mind could intervene. She hit the floor on both knees, the wolf pup clutched to her chest, her shawl askew, her hair loose and falling across her face. Look at me. The command was quiet, not unkind. Helena looked up. Aaron Hoydle was kneeling in front of her. He had lowered himself to the floor of his own great hall, in front of his entire court and his intended mate and the high priest and 1,000 candles, and was kneeling at her level with his silver storm eyes 3 feet from her face and his expression stripped of every layer of composure she had ever seen him wear from a distance. This was not the controlled monarch of the council chamber. This was a man who was shaking, barely, almost imperceptibly, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he had stopped believing anyone would ever answer. You, he said. The word fell into the silence of the hall and landed like a stone in still water. He breathed in. His eyes closed for a fraction of a second, the expression of a man choosing what to believe. When they opened again, something in them had settled. Resolved. Gone final the way things go final when a decision that has been impossible for a very long time is suddenly, irreversibly made. My wolf knows you. The murmur that moved through the crowd was a living thing. Helena heard it the way she heard everything in this moment, through thick glass, distorted and distant, because the whole of her attention had collapsed to the 2 feet of air between her face and his. She should say something. She should say, "You are mistaken." She should say, "My lord, I am only a servant." She should say, "There are things about me that would have me executed by morning." What she said was nothing at all. Aaron rose. He turned to face the stunned assembly Lady Sin, the high priest, Lady Harrow in the front row with her pale eyes narrowed to points, the hundreds of nobles who had come to watch a king bind himself to a dynasty and were instead watching something they had no context for. His voice rang through the hall. "This woman is my fated mate. Prepare a new ceremony. The one I will be claiming is her." Lady Sin made a sound that was not quite a cry and not quite a word. The high priest began to speak and stopped. The room dissolved into noise. And in the front row, Lady Harrow did not gasp, did not speak, merely looked at Helena with eyes like pale fire, measuring, calculating, and did not look away. Helena's fingers found the edge of her shawl. She pressed it tighter against her back, against the mark she had spent 15 years hiding, the raised and intricate map of the shadow realm burned into her skin at birth. The brand that would see her dead if anyone here knew it existed. Aaron extended his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, the hand of a king, calloused and large, extended toward a servant girl kneeling on rose petals with a wolf pup in her arms and a death sentence hidden beneath her shawl. She thought about everything she was, everything she had been hiding. The empty years and the careful silence and the small, guttered flame of feeling she had kept alive in secret. She thought about the way he had found her across 30 feet of crowd and shadow mid-ceremony, without hesitation, and the realization arrived with a clarity that was almost painful. He still didn't know her name. Something broke loose in her chest. Something that had been sealed very tightly for a very long time. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, certain, careful in a way that suggested he understood more about breakable things than she had expected from a man who ruled with that kind of effortless authority. He drew her to her feet. The wolf pup rearranged itself in the crook of her free arm, still watching everything with those worried gold eyes. "Your name," he said quietly. Not a demand. An asking. "Helena," she said. Her voice was barely a sound. "Helena Wrighton." He said it once, as though learning the shape of it. Helena. The way her name sounded in his mouth was a problem she was not prepared for. He turned to face the watching court with his hand still holding hers, and Helena Wrighton, who had spent 3 years being invisible, stood in the blazing light of 1,000 candles she had lit herself and understood that nothing about her life would ever be small again. She held her shawl more tightly around her back. She had a feeling the real ceremony had only just begun. Chapter 2. They did not prepare a ceremony that night. What they prepared instead was a room. Helena was swept away by 2 of Aaron's personal guard before the noise of the hall had even properly peaked, hustled through a side corridor and up 2 flights of stone stairs and through a door she had never opened in 3 years of cleaning this castle, into a chamber that was the opposite of every room she had ever occupied. Fire in a wide hearth. A canopied bed with curtains the deep red of old wine. A window seat overlooking the castle's inner courtyard, where torches burned in a ring, and she could hear the distant, confused noise of the disrupted ceremony dissolving into the evening. 2 maids followed. They moved around her with the efficient, slightly panicked energy of people who had been given an assignment they did not fully understand and were determined to complete it before anyone changed their minds. A gown appeared. Warm water. A brush for her hair. The wolf pup was gently relocated to a cushion by the hearth, where it circled twice and settled with the self-satisfied air of an animal that had always known things would improve. Helena sat very still in the chair and let it happen. She had learned early in life that when circumstances became too large to comprehend, the safest strategy was to become very small and very quiet and let the moment carry her until she could find her footing again. She had done it the night the hunters came for her family. She had done it the morning she walked through the servants' entrance of Valdris Castle with borrowed papers and a borrowed name. She was doing it now in a room that cost more per night than she earned in a year, while two strangers dressed her like a doll and her wolf pup snored by the fire, and somewhere in this castle a king was doing whatever kings did when they had just shattered their own mating ceremony. The maids finished. They stepped back and looked at her with expressions that mixed professional satisfaction with unconcealed curiosity. Helena caught a glimpse of herself in the polished bronze mirror across the room and did not recognize what she saw. The same dark hair, the same sharp cheekbones, the same pale skin. But the gown was deep blue, simply cut, and it made the rest of her look different. Less like a ghost, more like a person. She kept her shawl. One of the maids reached for it gently, and Helena caught the woman's wrist before she could think about it. The maid blinked. Helena released her hand. "The shawl stays," she said quietly. "Please." The maid nodded without asking why, and Helena exhaled. The knock at the door came 20 minutes later. She knew it was him before the guard outside announced it. She knew it the same way the wolf pup knew. The small animal was already on its feet, facing the door, tail in motion, ears forward. Something in the air had changed. Something that hummed at the edge of sensation, warm and electric and new, like standing too close to lightning before it strikes. The mate bond. Half-formed and fragile, and already apparently able to announce him from 30 feet away. She stood. Aaron came in alone. He had not changed, still black, still the silver chain medallion, still the dark hair and the harsh, beautiful face and the silver eyes that she had been cataloging from a careful distance for 3 years and was now expected to look at directly. From a distance of approximately 8 feet, with no pillar between them. He closed the door. He looked at her for a long moment in which neither of them said anything. Then, "Are you hurt?" "No." She wasn't. Physically. "Are you?" Something shifted in his expression. "No." A pause. "I have not been this uninjured in 10 years. She understood what he meant. The wolf. The dying bond, the 10-year fade, the quiet agony of an animal starving inside the man who housed it. He had told the entire court it had stopped the moment he found her, and he had said it with the flat certainty of a man reporting a fact, without dramatics, without asking for anything in return. He had simply said, "My wolf knows you," as though that was the entirety of the thing and nothing else needed explaining. Helena sat down on the edge of the window seat because standing seemed unsustainable. He remained near the door, not caged, not threatening, simply maintaining a distance that told her he was paying attention to her comfort in the way of someone who had thought about it. "You should know," she said, "that I agreed to this in front of your entire court before I knew what it meant. I was on my knees and in shock, and I took your hand." She met his eyes. "That is not a complaint. But it is not the same as choosing freely." He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said, "it isn't." "So," she folded her hands in her lap. "What are you asking me, actually? If we removed your court and your wolf and the ceremony and all of it, what are you asking?" He crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her, and the firelight caught the angles of his face and threw them into sharp relief, all that controlled, exhausted beauty that she had been looking at from doorways for 3 years. Up close, he looked tired. Not the tiredness of an evening, but the tiredness of years. The kind that lives in the set of a jaw. "I am asking," he said, "if you will accept me, knowing that it is dangerous. Knowing that I am a king, and this will become political before morning. Knowing that there are people in this castle tonight who will consider your death a solution to the problem you represent." He paused. "I am asking anyway." Because my wolf stopped hurting when I found you, and I have not felt anything but pain for a very long time, and I am aware that is not a fair thing to put on a person I met 30 minutes ago, but I am asking anyway." The fire crackled. The wolf pup had migrated from the hearth cushion to Helena's feet, where it sat with its chin on her slipper. "There are things about me," Helena said carefully, "that you don't know." "Yes, dangerous things." "I expect so. Things that would," she stopped. "Tried again. Things that could change what you want from this." He held her gaze. "I find that unlikely. You don't know what they are." "No," he agreed. "I don't. And I am not asking you to tell me tonight." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the map of 10 years of carrying something very heavy. "I am asking you one question. One, will you accept me? Yes or no? Everything else we will find our way through." The wolf pup sneezed with tremendous conviction. Helena almost smiled. She thought about 15 years of hiding. She thought about the shawl on her back and the shadows in her blood and the careful, guttered smallness of a life lived entirely in the spaces between other people's certainties. She thought about the morning he had said good morning to her in the East Corridor like she was a person, and how she had carried that for a week like something precious. "Yes," she said. Something in him went quiet in a way that was very different from stillness. "Then we will hold the ceremony tomorrow night," he said. "In the chapel. Small. Private." His eyes dropped to the shawl across her shoulders. "If there is anything you need me to do, or not do, during the ceremony itself, you will tell me." He was giving her an opening. He didn't know why, but he was offering it anyway, a way to set the terms of her own claiming without having to explain herself. Helena felt the thing in her chest shift again, the sealed place cracking further. "The claiming bite," she said. "Not my neck." He looked at her steadily. "Where then?" "My wrist." He nodded. No question. No hesitation. "Your wrist." She exhaled. They sat for a while longer, the fire between them, the wolf pup asleep on her feet, the noise of the castle settling into the particular quiet of a building that has had a shock and is still processing it. He told her 3 things about himself that she had not known from watching him from doorways, that he had not shifted fully in 4 years because his wolf was too weak and the attempt caused pain. That his mother had been the one to first tell him about the fated mate bond, the summer before she died, when he was 17. That he had, in recent months, begun to make his peace with the idea that he would never find her. He said the last thing with the same flat matter-of-factness with which he said everything, and it hit her somewhere behind the sternum with a force that had nothing to do with the half-formed bond. She told him 3 things in return, that the wolf pup had followed her home from the eastern woods 8 months ago, and she hadn't had the heart to turn it back. That she had read every book in the servants' library twice. That she had cleaned this specific room, where she was now sitting 47 times in 3 years without ever imagining she would be inside it as anything other than a ghost. He almost smiled. Almost. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Tomorrow evening," he said. "You'll be safe until then." "You can't promise that." "No," he agreed. "But I can make it very inconvenient for anyone who tries otherwise." He looked at her one more time, that look, that impossible, unguarded look, the one she didn't have a name for. "Sleep, Helena." He left. She sat for a long time in the window seat, watching the courtyard torches burn and the wolf pup sleeping on her feet, and she pressed the flat of her hand over the center of the mark on her back and tried to understand what she had agreed to. She had agreed to a ceremony. She had agreed to be claimed. She had agreed to stand in the light and be seen by the one person in Valdres who had decided, without knowing why, that she was worth stopping everything for. She had not agreed to stop being afraid. She suspected that was not a thing that could be agreed to. She would work with what she had. Chapter 3. The morning after the ceremony, Lady Harrow came with a lawyer. Helena heard the argument from behind the closed door of the chamber. She had been given Aaron's voice, steady and unhurried, Harrow's voice. The clipped, controlled fury of a woman who had been managing her rage for decades and was choosing very carefully how much of it to show. The words came through the stone in fragments. Annulment. Irregular. The word Valorn was not spoken, but Helena felt it in the air like a held blade. She sat on the edge of the bed with the wolf pup in her lap and her hands folded and waited. She was good at waiting. By midday there was a council meeting, and by evening there were guards posted at her corridor who were, she was told, there for her protection and not her confinement, and she chose to believe this because the alternative was not useful. Aaron came to her in the late afternoon and told her with the particular economy of a man who disliked delivering bad news that Harrow had filed a formal objection with the High Council and that a hearing was scheduled for 3 days hence, and that she would need to appear. At the hearing, Helena said, in front of the full council. Yes, they will ask who I am. Yes, what I am. A pause. You will not be required to answer anything you don't choose to answer. I will have my legal counsel with you. Helena looked at him. That's not what I'm asking. He met her eyes. I know. If Harrow's people start digging, then we deal with what they find when they find it. He said it like a man who had made a calculation and arrived at an answer he intended to hold. Together. Together. The words sat in her mouth in a way she didn't know what to do with. She had been managing things alone for 15 years, and the idea of someone standing next to her in the management of them was so foreign it felt like hearing a word in a language she'd never learned. The hearing never arrived. What arrived instead, 2 nights before it was scheduled, was Lady Harrow. Not at the door, with an appointment. Through a passage in the wall that Helena had not known existed, a servant's corridor that connected the south wing to the main keep, that she should have known because she had cleaned every inch of this castle. And the fact that she had not known about this particular passage told her exactly how long Harrow had been planning this specific evening. The chamber filled with guards before Helena had fully come awake. 6 of them, Harrow's livery, professional and silent, and behind them Lady Harrow herself in a night-dark gown that made her look like the personification of institutional authority, silver hair precise, pale eyes lit with cold satisfaction. A woman who had waited decades for this particular moment and was savoring the arrival. I don't require a scene, Harrow said, with the tone of someone who would find a scene acceptable if necessary. I simply require the girl to remove her shawl. Helena was on her feet. The wolf pup was pressed against her calves, hackles raised, making a sound it had never made before, a low, vibrating growl that seemed too large for its small body. The shawl stays, Helena said. It is a very simple thing. Harrow took a step forward. The guards moved with her, and the geometry of the room shrank. You have been hiding something. The Valdris High Council has the right to know what their king has made it. The law is on our side, girl. Remove the shawl, or my guards will remove it for you. Helena looked at the 6 guards. She looked at the door. There were more in the corridor. She could hear them. She looked at Lady Harrow's pale, satisfied eyes, and she understood what this was. This was not about the law. This was about exposure, about the specific political violence of dragging a secret into the light in front of the right people at the right moment. Harrow had arranged witnesses. There would be a council member here, or a courier ready to ride, someone positioned to receive and broadcast what was about to be revealed. The shawl and the mark beneath it, and the end of Helena Wrighton. The wolf pup growled. Helena made a decision. She had spent 15 years suppressing the thing in her blood because suppressing it meant surviving. She had locked it down so thoroughly that sometimes she could almost believe it wasn't there, a door she had sealed from the inside, the hinges rusted with years of disuse, the frame grown over with the careful ivy of ordinary life. She stopped suppressing it. The shadows took her. It happened faster than she expected and more completely than she had ever allowed. The candles in the room guttered. Not slowly, but all at once, snuffed by a darkness that did not come from any natural source. It rolled out from her body like breath, like exhale, like something that had been held for 15 years finally allowed to move. Cold and absolute and deeply, primally certain of itself. Several of Harrow's guards stumbled backward with sounds that were not quite screams. One of them dropped a torch that extinguished before it hit the floor. Lady Harrow did not move, but for the first time in their brief acquaintance, her pale eyes showed something that was not satisfaction. "Valorn," she said. The word came out quiet, reverent, horrified, and hungry in a way that made Helena's stomach turn. "Kill her." Helena ran for the door. She made it. Not cleanly. A guard caught the edge of her sleeve and she wrenched free, leaving fabric, and the darkness came with her as she moved, wrapping her passage, and the wolf pup ran at her heels with that impossible growl still reverberating in its small chest. Into the corridor, heart hammering, bare feet on cold stone, shadows spooling out behind her like a cloak she hadn't asked for. An arm caught her around the waist. She reacted before she thought, hands up, shadows surging, and then the voice reached her. "Helena." Aaron. He was in the corridor in night clothes, sword drawn, 3 personal guards flanking him with torches, and he was holding her with one arm and looking at Harrow's guards in the doorway with an expression that could not fairly be called anger, because anger was a human thing, and this was something older and more terminal. "Lower your weapons," he said. They lowered their weapons. Harrow appeared in the doorway behind them, composed again, her pause of vulnerability sealed back under control. She looked at Aaron holding Helena in the corridor, and then she said, precisely and clearly, the thing she had come to say. "Your mate is Valorn. Your court will know by morning. Your people will demand her execution." A pause. "I am not your enemy, my king. I am simply the first person to say out loud what you are going to be hearing for the rest of your life." The corridor was very quiet. Aaron had not released Helena. He turned slowly, without releasing her, until he was facing Harrow directly, his body positioned between the two of them with the unhurried certainty of a man who had made this particular calculation before Harrow had finished speaking. "Leave this wing," he said. "Now, Aaron. The next person who moves toward my mate will not receive another warning." The silver eyes were winter cold and absolutely calm. "I am not my grandfather. I know what was done to the Valorn, and I know who gave the order, and I know which house profited from it. We will be discussing that at length. For now, leave." Harrow left. Her guards followed. The click of the passage door, somewhere behind the wall, marked her exit. The corridor was quiet and cold and lit by Aaron's guards' torches, and Helena realized she was still pressed against his side with shadows coiling slowly back into her like smoke drawn down a flue, the darkness receding, the candles in the chamber behind them relighting one by one of their own accord. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. "My wolf has been searching," he said, "for a Valorn mate." His voice was quiet, careful, carrying something enormous with great steadiness. "The curse on my bloodline was placed by a Valorn woman my ancestor destroyed. The only way to break it is to fully bond with a Valorn mate." He paused. "I should have told you this before the ceremony. I did not, because I was afraid you would believe that is why I chose you." Helena processed this. "Is it why you chose me?" she asked. "No," he said. I chose you because my wolf went quiet. Because I had been dying for 10 years and for 30 seconds in that hall everything stopped hurting. He held her gaze. The curse is an additional piece of information. The wolf pup had planted itself on Aaron's feet and appeared to be attempting to herd him deeper into the corridor towards somewhere warmer, which under the circumstances struck Helena as remarkably sensible. She looked at the mark hidden beneath her shawl. She looked at him. She thought about what it meant, what the curse meant, what she meant to his dying wolf, what it was going to mean to navigate a court and a kingdom now that Harrow had said the word Valorn in front of 6 guards who would repeat it. Tell me the rest, she said. All of it. About the curse. About my bloodline. About what fully bonding actually means. He looked at her for a moment. Come inside, he said. I will tell you everything. Chapter 4. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Helena's life, and Helena had lived some extremely strange weeks. She was queen, technically. The title had not been formally conferred. The full court ceremony was being held in abeyance, while Harrow's legal challenge wound through the council. While the word Valorn spread through the castle, and then through the city beyond the walls, and then outward in all directions like ink in water. She was queen in the way of a woman who slept in a queen's chamber and ate at a queen's table and was addressed as my lady by everyone who spoke to her while also being watched with great care by a significant portion of the castle's population who had not yet decided what they thought about all of this. She found, to her surprise, that she preferred it to invisibility. Not the watching. Not the weight of other people's uncertainty pressed against her wherever she went. The careful neutrality of people who had spent 3 years not seeing her and were now required to see her and had not yet made their peace with the requirement. That part she did not prefer. But the not hiding the fact of being visible, of walking into a room without pressing herself to the edges, of sitting at the long council table and taking up exactly as much space as the chair allowed, that part she found unexpectedly livable. The wolf pup helped. It had developed strong feelings about the castle and its layout and communicated these feelings by selecting different rooms to sleep in on different nights, which meant that Helena was often followed by the small dignified figure of a gray-gold wolf making autonomous architectural decisions. The castle staff, who had spent 3 years pretending not to see Helena, had no such ambivalence about the pup. It was fed 11 times in a single day during its 2nd week of official residence. And Aaron. Aaron in private was nothing like the man she had been watching from doorways. She had known the king, the controlled, unhurried, slightly terrifying authority of a man who moved through rooms and changed them simply by being there. What she had not known was the man underneath it. The one who appeared in the mornings before the official day began, in the antechamber outside her rooms, with a book he thought she might like and the particular expression of a person who has done something they're not entirely sure was appropriate and are waiting to find out. The one who brought her to the East Tower on the 3rd evening because the view of the valley at dusk was, he said, the best thing in Valdris, and he had been saving it. The one who asked questions about her life, careful, unhurried questions that never pushed, that simply opened a door and waited to see if she would walk through it. She told him things. Small things, then larger ones. She told him about the years before the castle, the moving and the hiding and the borrowed names. She told him about the gift, the shadows, the way they responded to her emotions when she wasn't suppressing them, the particular cold, comfortable feel of them, like being held by something that had known her whole life. She did not yet tell him about the mark's full meaning. She had told him it existed, and he had told her he knew, and they had left the rest of it for later by unspoken agreement, the way you might leave a difficult conversation for a day when you are both less raw. He told her, in return, about the wolf. The way it had begun fading 6 years into his search, a dimming, like a fire slowly deprived of air. The pain that became simply part of his days, so familiar he had stopped distinguishing it from ordinary sensation. The way his wolf had refused to shift for 4 years because the attempt cost more than it produced. He told her all of this with the flat precision of someone reporting an experience that has passed its emotional threshold and become simply fact, and she listened and did not offer him pity because she had the sense he did not want pity. That pity would have landed badly, that what he wanted was simply to be understood. She understood. She had spent 15 years carrying something that should have killed her in a different way. She knew about the costs of suppression. But something was wrong. She saw it in the second week. A tremor in his hand at dinner, quickly stilled, his fingers wrapped around a goblet with slightly more force than necessary. A grimace, brief and controlled, when he thought she wasn't watching from across the room. The line of his jaw tighter than usual on mornings after council sessions that had run long. The curse had not healed. The bond between them, half-formed, fragile, the result of the private chapel ceremony, had helped. He told her so. His wolf was more present, more stable, the pain less constant. But the full cure required a full bond, and the full bond required something he had told her about in careful, unhurried language on the night Harrow exposed her, in the chamber with the fire and the sleeping wolf pup between them. The full bond had killed every king who attempted it. She had been sitting with that information for 2 weeks now, turning it over, finding no angle from which it looked smaller or more manageable. Every king who had attempted to fully bond with a Vaelorn mate had died within hours. The curse was designed that way. The cure and the death were the same mechanism. The Vaelorn woman who had placed it had been thorough. She watched him grimace and smooth his expression, and she watched the tremor in his hand, and she pressed her mouth together and said nothing, because saying it out loud would require them to have the conversation, and they were not yet, she thought, in a place where that conversation would not crack something still too new to bear cracking. She would know when it was time. It was the evening of the 17th day, dusk, the East Tower, his book closed on his knee and her feet tucked beneath her on the opposite end of the bench, and the wolf pup asleep between them like a furry treaty. When she saw him press 2 fingers against the center of his chest and hold them there for a moment with his eyes closed. She said nothing. He opened his eyes and found her watching him, and he did not look away. "It is not getting worse," he said. "Only, it has not gotten better enough." She nodded. "Helena." "Not yet," she said. Not dismissal, a timing. "Tell me first when you're ready to tell me everything. Not the version you've prepared. The actual version." Something passed through his face that she could only call gratitude, and it looked strange on a man who was not accustomed to needing it from anyone. "Not tonight, then," he said. "Not tonight," she agreed. They sat in the East Tower until the valley went dark and the torches lit below them in the courtyard, and the wolf pup woke and stretched and yawned with the magnificent total body commitment of an animal that had never known a moment of existential difficulty. And Helena thought about love, about what it felt like to be in the middle of falling into it, the strange weightless vertiginous quality of it, the way it made the dangerous things not smaller, but somehow more bearable. Then she thought about a knock arriving at their door 3 days later, and a guard announcing a visitor at the gates claiming to be her dead brother. But that was 3 days away. Tonight there was a valley going dark and a wolf pup yawning, and a man beside her who had stopped pretending his jaw didn't hurt. Tonight was enough. Chapter 5. The knock came on the 20th day. A guard, apologetic and carefully neutral, at the door of the East Solar, where Helena was attempting to understand a 600-year-old Valdris law text, and Aaron was writing dispatches, and the wolf pup was doing something suspicious in the corner. A visitor at the outer gate, claiming to be family, claiming to have traveled a long way, claiming to be her brother. Helena set down the law text. She had buried her brother in her mind 15 years ago. Morai, 2 years older than her, dark-haired, scarred on his left hand from the time they had been climbing the mill roof and he had fallen. Morai, who had been with her the night the hunters came, who had pushed her through the east window and told her to run and not look back. She had not looked back. She had run, and she had not stopped running, and she had eventually stopped expecting him to be at the end of the running, because people who told you to run and stayed behind generally did not survive. And hoping otherwise was a kind of cruelty she could not afford. 15 years. She looked at Aaron. He looked at her. "You don't have to see him," he said. "I know. If he is who he claims. I know." She stood. "I need to see him." The man in the audience chamber looked like a ghost made of memory. He had her sharp cheekbones. Her dark hair, longer than she remembered, shot through now with early silver at the temples. Her pale skin marked by years and weather, and the claw-mark scars that crossed his face like a story written in someone else's hand, 3 parallel lines from temple to jaw, deep and old. He was taller than she remembered. He was alive. He looked at her like she was the answer to 15 years of searching. She looked at him like she was seeing a dead man walk. Behind her, Aaron's hand found the small of her back, steady, quiet, not a claim but a weight, an anchor point. She felt the wolf pup press against her ankle. "Helena," the man said. His voice was the same. She had not remembered, until this moment, that she still knew the sound of her brother's voice, that it had been living in some preserved corner of her memory all this time, waiting. "Show me your hand," she said. He held it out without hesitation, left hand, palm up. The scar ran across the heel of his palm like a white crescent, exactly where it had always been, exactly the shape of the mill roof's broken edge. Her breath left her in a long, unsteady exhale. "Morai," she said. He crossed the room, and she met him in the middle, and his arms came around her with the fierce, desperate grip of someone who had been carrying a grief for 15 years and had only now found somewhere to set it down. She held on. The wolf pup circled them with anxious energy, having decided this was an important event that required its presence and possibly its intervention. Aaron watched from the doorway with his arms folded and an expression of careful, controlled skepticism that Helena noted and tucked away for later. Morai had information. He had, he said, spent 15 years hunting for answers about their bloodline, about the Valorn Purge, about the curse that had been wound through Valdris's royal lineage since their great-grandmother's time. He had found things. He had found, specifically, the location of the Heart of Shadows. The name landed in the room like a stone. The Heart of Shadows. Helena had heard of it, vaguely, in the fragments of Valorn history she had pieced together from the scattered texts she'd managed to find in 3 years of castle libraries. An artifact. A focal point. An obsidian vessel that had once belonged to the woman who had placed the curse, who had poured into it the entirety of her intent and her grief and her fury at what Aaron's ancestor had done to her people. When the king had stolen it, he had not broken the curse. He had stored the source of it. The heart was still here, in Valdris, in the castle itself. A vault, Morai said, beneath the keep, behind the oldest part of the foundation. I found the records in a library 3 years ago, sealed, but not sealed well enough. He looked at Aaron with those scarred, traveling eyes. The magic on the vault responds to Valorn blood. Helena can open it. If we retrieve the heart. If you retrieve the heart, Aaron said, what happens to the curse? Morai's eyes shifted. A fraction of a second. Helena caught it and did not say anything. It can be broken, Morai said. That's what the records say. The heart is the anchor, destroy it, and the curse unravels. Aaron looked at Helena. She looked back. Something passed between them that did not require words, the compressed language of two people who had been paying close attention to each other for 3 weeks. "We'll need time to verify the records," Aaron said. "And I'll need my archivists to review whatever documentation you've found before we proceed." "Of course," Morai said easily. Too easily, Helena thought, and then thought, "This is my brother, the one I thought was dead," and pushed the thought away. But later, when Morai had been given rooms and the audience chamber had emptied and she and Aaron stood alone in the corridor with the wolf pup and the evening quiet around them, she said, "You don't trust him." "No," Aaron said. "But you believe he's my brother. The scar and the recognition are real," he said. "That doesn't mean his information is." He looked at her carefully. "What does your gut tell you?" Helena thought about the fraction of a second in Morai's eyes when Aaron had asked what happens to the curse. That tiny, controlled shift, there and gone. "That something is not the whole story," she said. "Yes." She pressed her mouth together. "He's still my brother." "Yes," Aaron said again. "He is." He turned toward the corridor window, the last light dying over the valley walls. His hand came up to his chest, that gesture, the 2 fingers pressed flat, the brief closed eyes. He did it faster now, she had noticed. More often. "Aaron." She said his name, and he looked at her, and she held his gaze. "Tell me about the full bond." "Tonight." "All of it." A long silence. "Tonight," he said. And that night, in the chamber with the fire and the sleeping wolf pup and the wolf pup's increasingly assertive opinions about the sleeping arrangements, he told her the thing he had been carrying since before she arrived, that the full bond was fatal, that every king who had attempted it had died, that the curse had been designed specifically to make the cure as lethal as the disease, because the Valorn woman who had placed it had not wanted the line to survive. That he had known this since he was 17 and had spent 10 years searching anyway, because the alternative was dying slowly instead of quickly, and at least the quick version meant he had found her first. Helena sat with all of this for a very long time. Then she said, "What if the heart isn't meant to be destroyed?" He looked at her. "What if it's meant to be transformed?" She pressed her hand flat over the mark on her back, the intricate, raised map of the Shadow Realm, burned into her skin at birth. The same symbol, she remembered suddenly, that was carved on the obsidian box in the records Morai had described. The same symbol. Her brother had arrived 3 days after she had started thinking seriously about the curse. With information. With a location. With a very clean and very convenient solution. She looked at the sleeping wolf pup. She thought about the fraction of a second in Morai's eyes. She thought, "I do not know yet, but I intend to find out." Chapter 6. They went to the vault on the 24th day. It took 3 days of preparation, Aaron's archivists confirming the location from 3 separate sources, the castle master-at-arms mapping the lower passages, a careful review of Morai's documents that turned up nothing false on their face, and several details that were, Aaron said quietly to Helena, either exactly what they appeared to be or exactly what someone wanted them to appear to be. The documents were clean. The map was accurate. The vault was real. Nothing was wrong and nothing felt right, and Helena went anyway. They went together. Aaron, Helena, Morai, for guards. The wolf pup had been left in the solar with strict instructions from Aaron and complete disregard from the wolf pup, who was almost certainly involved in some architectural expedition of its own, and would be wherever she expected it to be when she returned, having arrived there by mechanisms she had given up trying to understand. The lower passages of Valdris were not for the faint-hearted. Helena had cleaned the castle for 3 years and had never been below the 2nd sublevel. The passages down here were older than the castle above, part of the original structure that the current building had been constructed over, stone that had been laid in a different century by people with different purposes. The air was cold and still and tasted of something she could not name. Her shadows moved with her down here, she noticed, with a responsiveness they did not always have above ground, as though this place knew what she was. Morai led the way. He moved through the passages with a certainty that meant he had been here before, which he had acknowledged when she asked and explained as the consequence of several months of research. She watched the certainty and thought, this is what knowing looks like, and this is what pretending to know also looks like, and the difference between them is not always visible. She kept her hand near the wall and felt her shadow steady around her like a held breath. The vault door was set into the deepest wall of the lowest passage. Not a door in the ordinary sense, no hinges, no handle, no visible seam in the stone. Simply a section of wall that was different from the others, that the torchlight fell across differently, that her gift recognized before her eyes did. The shadows in the passage thinned around it, pulling back, as though something behind the stone was breathing them in. Helena stepped forward. The magic tested her. She had expected something dramatic, a challenge, a demand, a puzzle. Instead, it was a recognition, slow and thorough, like a hand pressed against her chest measuring the beat of her heart. It found the mark on her back, and it found the shadows in her blood, and it found something else, something older and deeper that she had not known was there, the specific signature of her lineage, the particular Valorn frequency that had been written into her before birth. The wall agreed with what it found. The stone moved. The vault beyond was small and cold and lit by its own faint luminescence, a blue-gray shimmer that came from nowhere and everywhere, the kind of light that seemed to predate torches. And at the center of the space, on a pedestal of black marble, was the heart of shadows. It was smaller than she had imagined. An obsidian box the size of 2 fists together, carved on every surface with the same interlocking symbols that marked her back, the map of the shadow realm rendered in meticulous, terrible detail. It pulsed. Not with light exactly, but with something that light was a poor approximation of a rhythm, like breathing, like something inside it had been waiting for a very long time and had just heard footsteps approaching. Helena approached it. She was not afraid. That surprised her. The last 2 weeks had been composed almost entirely of various kinds of fear of discovery, of the council hearing, of what the full bond meant, of what Morai did and did not know, and here, in front of the thing at the center of all of it, the fear was simply gone. What was there instead was something that felt like recognition. She picked it up. Power moved through her like a tide coming in. Not violent, not the desperate eruption of the night Harrow's guards came, not a weapon or a warning. This was something else. Ancient and vast and deeply, bone certainty familiar, the way shadows were familiar, the way her own heartbeat was familiar. It moved through every part of her and settled. The mark on her back burned white-hot for a long, searing moment, and then went quiet. She turned to Aaron, and she saw his face, and she understood. He was not looking at the heart. He was looking at her back. Her shawl had slipped. The vault's strange light played across the mark in full, all of it, every symbol, every line of the map she had been hiding for 15 years, exposed and luminous in the blue-gray shimmer of the vault. And beside it, above it, woven into its edges, the same symbol carved into the box she was holding. "You did not break the curse," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Helena, you absorbed it." The heart of shadows fell from her hands. Aaron's knees hit the floor. Chapter 7. The curse moved through Aaron like frost through stone. Helena saw it happen from 3 feet away and could not stop it. The blue-gray light of the vault dimmed as the heart of shadows hit the floor, and in the same breath the mark on her back went from white-hot to ice-cold, and the power that had moved through her so briefly, so vastly, so familiarly, was no longer moving through her. It was moving through the bond between them, through the half-formed, fragile thread of the private chapel ceremony, the wrist bite and the quiet promise and the careful question asked in firelight. Through the connection that existed whether they had completed it or not. Into him. Aaron's hands pressed flat against the stone floor. His wolf was fighting. She could see it in the way his shoulders shook, in the white of his knuckles, in the silver of his eyes briefly eclipsed by something gold and vast and burning. The wolf was trying to absorb the impact. The wolf was trying to protect him the way it had been designed to protect him, and it was not enough because the curse had been specifically, precisely designed to ensure the wolf was not enough. Aaron. She was on her knees beside him before she thought about it. Her hands found his face. Look at me. He looked at her. The gold faded from his eyes. Silverstorm, exhausted, still. I'm here, he said. What is this? She heard her own voice, low and controlled, the voice of someone who was afraid and was not permitting the fear to be louder than necessary. What just happened? The mark, he said. His breathing was careful, measured, a man managing pain with the efficiency of long practice. The symbols on it, they're not just a map. The mark is a container. It was placed at birth by the original Valorn, a way to carry the heart's power safely. When you picked up the heart, the power recognized the container. He stopped, breathed. But you're bonded to me. Half bonded. The power that moved through you. Found you, she said. Found the curse, he said. The curse is designed to consume any power directed at it. It consumed what it could reach. He pressed the heel of his hand against his sternum. My wolf is still here. But the curse has another careful breath. It has accelerated. Behind her, Helena heard the sound of the vault passage. She turned. Lady Harrow stood in the vault doorway. Not the Lady Harrow of the castle corridors, the composed, silver-haired noblewoman with her political calculations and her careful aristocratic fury. This was something that Harrow had been beneath all of that, all this time. She blazed. Literally. The corrupted light poured from her in waves, cold and gold-bright and wrong in the specific way of power that has been accumulated through methods that leave marks on the carrier. She looked younger, years younger, decades, and she looked hungry, the hunger of someone who had been patient for so long that the patience itself had become a kind of violence. Morai stood beside her. His scarred face was entirely still. Not guilty. Not apologetic. Simply finished with a performance. Helena's chest did something terrible. I apologize for the deception, Morai said, in a voice that was her brother's voice and belonged entirely to a stranger. It was necessary. He's not real, Aaron said beside her. He was on his feet, she didn't know how, through what act of will against the frost spreading through his chest, but he was standing. He's wearing a dead man's face. The scar on his hand, Harrow has had Valorn artifacts for decades. Enough to recreate details from a document, from a record. He looked at the scarred stranger who wore her brother's features. Your actual brother has been dead for 15 years. The scarred stranger said nothing. His expression did not change. Helena stood. The grief hit her with the clean, absolute force of a thing that had been waiting for 15 years to be fully felt. Not the anticipatory grief of hope worn down over time. This was sharp and final, the specific anguish of a door closing on a possibility she had not, until tonight, admitted she was still holding open. She felt it completely for approximately 4 seconds because she could not afford more than 4 seconds, and she had learned a long time ago how to carry grief efficiently. Harrow spoke. She spoke for some time. The specific satisfaction of a woman who has waited decades to give a speech and is not rushing it. The House Harrow had been hunting Vaelorn for 30 years, not to destroy them, but to harvest them, to extract and stockpile the power that Vaelorn bloodlines carried before it dispersed at death. The Heart of Shadows, retrieved from the vault, would have been sufficient on its own. But Helena had been better than the heart. Helena was a living vessel who had just absorbed the heart's power. And now, with the curse accelerated and Aaron on his knees, and the mate bond carrying the impact. "You're going to die," Harrow said, almost gently, "both of you, within hours. The curse will finish what it started. And when your mate bond breaks at death, the Vaelorn power inside her will be released. And I will be standing in this vault when it is released. And then we are done." Helena looked at the obsidian box on the floor. She looked at Harrow, blazing with stolen light. She looked at Aaron beside her, frost moving up through his chest and his jaw set and his silver eyes still, impossibly still, looking at her with an expression she understood now. That she had been reading for weeks from doorways and east towers and fire-lit chambers. She looked at the mate bond between them. The half-formed, fragile, unfinished thread. The Heart of Shadows amplified power, Harrow had said. Any power. Helena thought, including this. Chapter 8. She did not tell Aaron what she was thinking. Not because she was hiding it, they had moved past hiding, she and Aaron, in the weeks of East Towers and books and careful questions answered in firelight. She did not tell him because telling him would require him to agree to it, and she was not certain he would agree to it, and she needed him to agree to it, and she needed the next 30 seconds to figure out how to give him enough information to choose freely. She picked up the Heart of Shadows. Harrow's expression sharpened. The power moved through her again, the vast, ancient, bone-familiar tide, and this time she did not let it carry. She held it, felt the shape of it against the inside of her skin, the accumulated force of a Vaelorn woman's grief and fury and intent, all of it still there after 2 centuries, preserved and exact. A letter written in power and never sent to its intended recipient. The curse wanted to move. It always wanted to move toward Aaron, through the bond, into the wolf and the bloodline and the accumulated weight of what his ancestor had done. That was its design, to follow love, to use love as a pathway, to transform the thing most precious into the instrument of ending. But the mark on her back was a container, designed specifically to carry this. She was Vaelorn. She was the last of the line that had made this thing. She thought, what if the curse can only be transformed by the same force that made it? She thought, grief became a curse. Love could become something else. But only if they both chose it. Only if the choice was mutual and free and without reservation, because the curse had been designed to destroy any king who used the bond as a transaction, who took a Vaelorn made as a cure, as a political tool, as a means to an end. It had killed every king before Aaron because every king before Aaron had been saving himself. The love had not been pure. The choice had not been mutual. She had 4 guards behind her, a blazing Harrow before her, Aaron running out of time beside her, and a dead woman's grief in her hands. She turned to Aaron. "I need you to hear me," she said. His eyes found her. Frost at the collar of his shirt, hand pressed flat against his sternum, but his eyes clear and silver and entirely present, entirely his. He was here. He was choosing to be here. "I think I know how to transform the curse," she said. "Not break it. Transform it. There's a difference, and the difference matters." She kept her voice level. This was important. This had to be a choice. The curse was made from grief. It can be transformed by the same Valorn power that created it. But the transformation requires completing the full bond, both of us willing, both of us choosing, both of us fully present. She looked at him steadily. Every king before you died because they were saving themselves. The bond has to be entered freely. No agenda. No transaction. Harrow made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a snarl. You're describing exactly what kills you, she said. The full bond is death. That's the curse. You've redescribed the poison as the cure. No, Helena said. She was still looking at Aaron. I've described it as a transformation. Death is what happens when you complete the bond to survive. This is what happens when you complete it knowing you might not. She paused. Mutual surrender. Not mutual rescue. Choosing each other even if it costs everything. Aaron's expression did something she had no name for. Helena, he said. Don't tell me to save myself, she said. Don't tell me you'll manage. Don't do any of the things you do when you're trying to protect me by removing me from the equation. She felt the shadows gathering at the edges of the vault, responding to her, steady and enormous and very old. I am in the equation. I have always been in the equation. The entire point of me being in the equation is to stay in it. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said, quietly, with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to say any of that. What were you going to say? I was going to say, he stopped. The frost at his collar had climbed slightly. She could see it. Time was a resource they did not have much of. He looked at her, and in his expression was everything he had been for weeks, the books, the East Tower, the careful questions. The morning he had said good morning to a servant girl in a corridor, and she had carried it for a week without knowing he had been carrying it too. I was going to say that I love you. I did not want to say it. But I cannot die or not die without telling you first. The vault was very quiet. I love you too, Helena said. I have loved you since before I knew your name. She had known it, she thought. She had known it from doorways and corridors, from the careful distance of 3 years of invisibility, from the way his voice in the council chamber sounded like something she had been waiting to hear. She had known it, and she had not said it to herself in those words because those words were dangerous, because that particular truth was the most dangerous thing she carried, more dangerous than the mark and the shadows and the death sentence of her bloodline. She said it now. She stepped toward him. He met her in the middle. The shawl fell. He saw the full mark for the first time, not the glimpsed edge in the vault light, not the guarded partial revelation, but all of it, every symbol and line of the map rendered in raised skin across her shoulder blade, luminous in the vault's blue-gray shimmer. Vast and precise and ancient and hers. His breath left him. It is not a brand, he said. It is a map. Yes, she said. He raised his hand. His fingers found the center of the mark, the point where all the symbols converged, the origin point of the Shadow Realm's map, and pressed gently. His mouth followed. His lips pressed against the center of the mark on her back. The world exploded. Chapter 9. The Shadow Realm was not what she had expected. She had imagined something cold, something dark, a negative space, a void, the inverse of the lit world she had spent her life navigating. She had imagined it the way she had imagined everything she'd been taught to fear, as an absence, as the empty place left behind when something is taken away. She had not imagined her mother. The woman had dark hair shot through with silver, sharp cheekbones that Helena recognized because they were hers, eyes the color of deep earth, warm and dark and carrying decades of something she was only now old enough to understand was not sadness, but patience. She was sitting on stone, in a space that was neither inside nor outside, that had weather the way dreams have weather felt but unlocatable, ambient, and total. You took longer than I thought, her mother said. Helena was aware, distantly, that her body was elsewhere. That the vault was elsewhere and Harrow was elsewhere and Aaron was somewhere. She could feel the bond, thin and brilliant and present. The thread that had been fragile and half-formed was now something else entirely. Something that felt permanent in the way structural things feel permanent, the way load-bearing walls feel permanent. Not decoration, but foundation. Is he, she started. Alive, her mother said. Both of you. For now. For a little while longer. Until the curse finishes transforming. A pause. You understood it correctly. The grief became a curse. The love becomes a protection. She looked at Helena with those patient, deep earth eyes. It takes time for one to become the other. Especially when the grief was that large. The woman who made it. She was my grandmother's grandmother, her mother said. She was very angry. She had reason to be. A small, complicated smile. Anger that old and that justified does not transform quickly. But it transforms. Helena sat down on the stone. The shadow realm settled around her like familiar clothing. I hid for 15 years, she said. Yes. I hid because you told me to. Yes. Was there a point at which you wanted me to stop? Her mother looked at her for a long moment. You stopped when you were ready, she said. Any earlier and you would have been caught. Any later, she paused. Any later and you would have died before you found each other. The timing was correct. A pause. Even if the hiding was very hard. Helena looked at her hands. The mark, she said. The full meaning. The part one didn't tell him. He knows now, her mother said. He saw it fully. He understood it. He chose anyway. The patient eyes were very steady. That was the test. Not the ceremony and not the vault. That? Seeing the whole truth of what you are and choosing freely. Helena closed her eyes. She thought about the East Tower and the wolf pup and the books he had brought and the careful questions and the morning in the corridor that had started all of this. The simple, good morning, offered to a servant girl who had spent 3 years learning to be invisible. She thought about a man who had stopped an entire ceremony because his wolf went quiet and he had not, in 10 years of pain, stopped trusting what quiet felt like. She thought about love. About what it felt like from the inside, the specific dizzy weight of it, the way it made dangerous things more bearable and beautiful things more beautiful, and the future something to be desired instead of merely endured. Daughter, her mother said. Helena opened her eyes. It is time to go back. The shadow realm began to fade, the ambient weather of it softening, the stone under her hands growing warm, the light changing from the deep gray blue of the in-between to something warmer and more solid. And the last thing she saw before the vault returned was her mother's face, patient, certain, at peace with something enormous, and the last thing she heard was, "You did well." She woke to Aaron's arms. He was on the floor of the vault, holding her across his chest, and when her eyes opened, he exhaled in a single long shudder that was, she understood, the closest he was ever going to come to losing composure in front of witnesses. His arms tightened for a moment, then loosened. The control returning, the king returning, but underneath it something that was not going back, something that had shifted permanently, settled into a new configuration, taken up residence in the architecture of who he was. The frost was gone from his color. She pressed her hand against his chest and felt the wolf, fully present, warm and enormous, alive in a way she could feel even through human skin. Not fading, not starved, not carrying 15 years of accumulated pain. Present. The curse, she asked. Gone, he said. My wolf is, he stopped. Tried again. Helena. My wolf is whole. She sat up. The vault around them was changed. The blue-gray luminescence was gone. The obsidian box lay open on the floor, cracked cleanly along every carved symbol, empty, the power that had lived in it for 2 centuries released, transformed, distributed into the bond between them and into the foundations of the castle and into the shadow realm itself, dispersed the way grief disperses when it is finally, fully grieved. Lady Harrow lay in the vault entrance. Old. Suddenly, entirely old, the stolen youth stripped away in the moment the Vaelorn power had erupted from the heart. The decades returned to her face all at once. She was breathing. She was not dangerous. She looked at Helena from the floor with eyes that had lost their pale fire and found something else in it, not acceptance, not regret. Simply the exhausted emptiness of someone who had been carrying something for 30 years and had just been relieved of it whether they chose to be or not. The false Morai was gone. Aaron helped Helena to her feet. His hand remained in hers. She looked at their joined hands for a moment and thought about the night in the Great Hall, 3 weeks and a lifetime ago, when she had been on her knees on rose petals, and he had offered this same hand, and she had taken it before she could think of all the reasons not to. She was glad she hadn't thought of them. "Harrow has fled to the Eastern Tower," said one of the guards from the vault entrance. "She has the castle soldiers cut off. There's a barrier of some kind." Aaron looked at Helena. Helena looked at him. "Together," she said. Chapter 10. The Eastern Tower blazed with stolen light. It was visible from the corridor windows as they climbed, that cold gold-white luminescence, wrung in the specific way of power that had been accumulated through decades of violence and extraction. Harrow had fled to the tower with what remained of her house guards, and the corrupted light she still carried, not the full reserve that had been dispersed when the heart broke, but enough. Enough to seal the tower's lower entrance with a barrier that 3 castle soldiers were currently pressing against with their shoulders and learning things about futility. Helena watched the barrier from 30 feet away. It was a wall of compressed Vaelorn energy. She could see the signature of it, the specific frequency of her bloodline's power turned against itself, purified of the person it belonged to and bent to someone else's purpose. It hurt to look at directly. It hurt in the specific way of seeing your own face in a distorted mirror, the wrongness of a familiar thing made wrong. "I can walk through it," she said. Aaron looked at her. "The heart recognized its own bloodline," she said. "The barrier is made from Vaelorn power. It won't hold against me." She looked at him. "I need you on the other side." "The barrier is also designed to stop the wolf," said the castle soldier at the front. "We've tried everything." Aaron's expression was not readable, and then it was, she had learned to read it, over 3 weeks of East Towers and firelit chambers, the specific compression of his jaw that meant he was doing a calculation that he would prefer not to be doing. He looked at the barrier. He looked at the tower. He looked at Helena. "I shift," he said. "You haven't been able to shift in 4 years." "My wolf is whole," he said. It was the same flat precision with which he said everything. Reporting a fact. "I expect the outcome is different now." The wolf pup pressed against Helena's ankle and then sat down with tremendous dignity, as though declaring that it would supervise proceedings from a reasonable distance. Aaron removed his sword belt and handed it to the nearest guard. He shifted. Helena had seen the wolf before, in her mind's image of it, large, silver-black, the wolf of a king, the wolf of 10 years and a dying bond and an ancestor's curse and everything he had been carrying since before she arrived. She had imagined it correctly in size and color and general impression. She had not imagined the presence of it, the physical actuality of standing next to something that old and that alive, the way the air around the animal changed, the way the castle soldiers instinctively stepped back and lowered their eyes, and the torchlight seemed to gather around it like attention paid. The wolf looked at her. She held its gaze. It looked at her with his eyes, Silverstorm, steady, entirely him, only larger and more absolute and carrying something she recognized as the same quality she had loved in him all along, the refusal to look away. She turned to the barrier. She walked through it. On the other side, the tower stairs were cold and empty and the stolen light pulsed from above. Behind her, she heard the barrier crack, the wolf's enormous body pressing through it from the outside, the Vaelorn power recognizing the bond between them, unable to distinguish between Vaelorn blood and Vaelorn love, and letting him through. The crack of his entry sounded like ice breaking in spring. She was already climbing. Harrow was in the top chamber. The room was small and circular and blazing, the stolen light so dense it was almost solid, pressing against Helena's vision, pressing against her shadows, trying to crowd them out. Harrow stood at the center of it, old and ruined and still burning with everything she had taken. 30 years of extraction reduced to this last-ditch final brightness. "You cannot beat me here," Harrow said. "I have more power than you have ever touched. I have been building this since before you were born." "I know," Helena said. She stepped into the room. "My people built you," Helena said. "The power you are carrying, the Vaelorn energy you have been harvesting for 3 decades, it was not made for you, and it has never fit you, and you know it. You have always known it. You can feel the way it sits wrong inside you like a stone swallowed, like something that belongs somewhere else and has never stopped trying to get back there." She looked at Harrow across the blazing light. "Give it back." Harrow laughed. The sound was old and cracked. "You cannot take it from me." "No," Helena said. "I can't." She looked at the light. She thought about the shadow realm and her mother's patient eyes and the grief that had become a curse and the love that had become a protection. She thought about what amplifies power. She thought about the bond behind her, the completed bond, the permanent as load-bearing walls bond, warm and present and vast in the space between her shoulder blades like a hand pressed steady against her back. She opened herself, not to the power, to the love. To the specific, particular, irreversible love she had been carrying since doorways and corridors, since a man said good morning to a servant girl and changed something in her that never went back. She opened herself to all of it. The East Tower at dusk, and the wolf pup on her feet, and the books delivered with the expression of someone uncertain they'd done the right thing, and the kneeling in the great hall, and the first careful question, and the wrist held gently in both hands, and the 3 words said in a vault with frost at the collar, and everything else, everything, the whole accumulated weight of being chosen by someone who saw her clearly and chose anyway. Power exploded from her. Not her power, the bond's power. The amplified, transformed, enormous force of 2 people loving each other with full knowledge of what the other was. It ripped through the stolen light like a tide. The Vaelorn energy in Harrow's body did not fight. It recognized its origin. It recognized the frequency of its own bloodline, and it moved, not pulled, not taken, simply going home. Like water released finding the lowest point, like a story returning to its proper ending. Every fragment Harrow had accumulated over 30 years, extracted from dying Vaelorn and stolen artifacts, and carefully hoarded reserves, it moved. Lady Harrow crumpled. The light went out. The room was dark for 1 breath, 2, and then the ordinary torchlight of the world returned, and Helena was standing in a circular room at the top of a tower, and the woman on the floor was old and small and entirely powerless. And behind her she heard the vast paws of the wolf on the stone stairs, and then the shift back to human, and then Aaron's arms around her from behind, both of them standing in the quiet aftermath of something enormous. She looked out the tower window. Dawn was coming. The valley below Valdris was gray-blue and still, the particular stillness of the world before the light touches it, the held breath moment before the day begins. Torches burned in the courtyard below where the castle was already in motion, guards and servants, and the first couriers of the morning, the ordinary machinery of a kingdom that had had a terrible night and was returning to itself. The wolf pup was at the top of the stairs. She had climbed the entire tower. She sat in the doorway with her chin up and her gold eyes bright, and the expression of an animal who had known, all along, that things would work out. Aaron pressed his face into Helena's hair. "It's done," he said. "Yes," she said. They stood at the window while the dawn came in, the valley going from gray-blue to gold below them, and Helena thought about visibility, about what it meant to stand in a window instead of behind a pillar, about the difference between watching and being present, about 3 years of doorways and corridors and the careful, guttered smallness of a life lived at the edges of other people's certainties. She thought about what came next, the council and the court and the long process of a kingdom learning to see something it had been taught to fear. She thought about Harrow's trial and the laws that would need to change and the Valorn history that would need to be written into the record instead of out of it. She thought about all the things she did not know how to do and all the things she was going to learn. She thought about the child, not yet, not real yet, only a possibility that the Shadow Realm had shown her in the space between her mother's patient eyes, and the specific, staggering weight of a future that was not about surviving but about living. "I was so afraid," she said. His arms tightened. "When I hid in that hall watching your ceremony," she said, "I never imagined this. I thought I was going there to let go of something. I didn't understand that you were going there to find it." He turned her, gently, until she was facing him. His hands cupped her face the way they always did, careful, like he understood the nature of breakable things. The Silverstorm eyes. "I thought I was choosing a stranger to save my wolf," he said. "Instead, I found my entire world." Below them in the courtyard, the wolf pup had made her way down from the tower and planted herself on the flagstones in a patch of early light, looking up at the window with the confident air of an animal whose work here was done. Helena laughed. The sound filled the tower room, filled the morning, filled the space that hiding had left behind, warm and full and entirely unguarded, the laugh of someone who has stopped managing the size of her joy. Aaron's expression, watching her, was the specific expression of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just set it down somewhere safe. They had shattered a mating ceremony. They had survived a noble's war, a false brother, a fatal bond, a 200-year-old curse, and the specific difficulty of loving someone when you believe you are not worth being loved. They had stood in a vault and said the true thing and let the world break around it. She had hidden to watch the mating ceremony. He had stopped everything when he found her. And together, they had rewritten history. 6 months later, Helena stood on the castle balcony in the early evening, watching the valley light change to gold, and Aaron came up behind her with his arms and his warmth and the wolf, fully present now, always present, filling the space where the dying had been. And she pressed her hand over the new life growing in her, unhurried and certain, and entirely without the need to be small. Below in the courtyard, the wolf pup, somewhat larger now, with the dignified bearing of an animal who had been present for important events and knew it, was reorganizing the castle gardens to her satisfaction, having long since graduated from architectural to horticultural concerns. Helena smiled. She was seen. She was here. She was exactly as large as she had always been, and she would not be made smaller again. The last of the Valorn was no longer the last secret in Valdris. She was its queen.
If you enjoy watching this story, please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.